Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on current trends across the book industry supply chain, particularly with respect to printing in the U.S. market. I'm Brian O'Leary, Executive Director of the Book Industry Study Group, and I'm happy to be able to have with us today Matt Baehr, Executive Director of the Book Manufacturers Institute, and Matt Kennell of Versa Press. Matt is a member of BISG and really active in several of our committees and working groups. We're going to kick off with Matt today. Matt, sorry, we'll have to try harder. We're going to have to kick off today with Matt Baehr to give us kind of an overview from the BMI perspective of what's going on. And then from there, I'm going to ask him some questions and switch gears and then have a conversation with Matt Kennell about what, from an individual printer's perspective, what he's seeing in the U.S. marketplace. So with that, Matt Baehr, thank you for being here, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Thanks, Brian. It's all right. There were so many Matts in my college cohort that I think for the first 5 years of my marriage, my wife had called me Baehr because that's what I was known as. So it took her 5 years. So you still got a couple more years. So don't worry about that.
Sounds almost affectionate.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Happy to join everybody here today. Just want to go over a few things about what we're seeing at the BMI in terms of trends as we roll into 2021. Back in September, we surveyed our membership just to see what 2020 had meant to them and what had happened, kind of on a quarter by quarter basis. And the beginning of 2020 was looking good. We actually saw 60% of the respondents were up quarter over quarter from Q1 19 to Q1 20, which was great news. And then the infamous this time last year hit mid-March, which kind of put a little bit of a stifle at the end of Q1, but really affected Q2 primarily. And we saw 2/3 respondents were down, and a quarter of those were down over 25%. So a big hit to business then. Then we asked them, granted this was in September, so we asked them to predict their Q4 year over year, and actually half of the respondents predicted that they would be up. So signaling a solid rebound after that kind of huge dip in the spring. But again, that was just predicting. We haven't gone back to them to see how that played out. That's kind of in the to-do category. But the big question was, we asked them how were their wait times, their lead times, and 60% were experiencing extended lead times, and most of those expected those to continue into Q1, which I think a lot of folks are seeing now. So what are we seeing this year? Funny enough, people are asking about run lengths, and for a lot of things, we're actually seeing run lengths increasing, especially books that have had a good life cycle here in the last 12 months, which would include cookbooks and then topical books on social justice, politics, and those things. We're definitely seeing longer run lengths. I think publishers are also planning around these capacity issues and extended lead times, because they're not quite sure how long it's going to take and what kind of capacity their printers are going to have. They are ordering a few more books just to make sure that they have them just in case. And then we've also seen a focus on bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. If folks were using offshore printers, there's just been such a question mark around supply chain, logistics, timing, costs of bringing things from overseas back. So it's made a lot more sense for folks to look for manufacturing partners here in the U.S. Print on demand continues to grow, even though we are seeing longer run lengths. Print on demand is still very much in the mix. In many instances, folks are saying that the quality is still increasing and now has pretty much matched the quality of offset in many instances. So that's a good sign. And as the reports keep showing, backlist sales continue to grow, and that primarily is due to the fact that titles which may not have been printed before now get that second life as print on demand options, and that it is absolutely assisting folks with inventory management, with these extended lead times and the other things that folks are seeing with logistics and transportation and all the rest. POD can be a helpful inventory management tool to partner or pair up with offset in many instances. So what are the other forces that are at play here in book manufacturing? Well, input prices are rising. Specifically, we're talking the paper market. That has to do with pulp, especially in China, as one of the major pulp producers. They've changed regulations, and we're seeing prices up there, and that's just going to be passed along through the supply chain into final paper pricing. And then, as mentioned, transportation and is just crazy right now. I saw a picture not too long ago. There's like 50 freighters sitting outside the port of LA just waiting to dock and unload because of COVID. They're having issues with getting enough workers at the docks because of the influx of goods and kind of the ripple effect over the last 12 months. There's not enough containers in some instances, not enough chassis for them to get moved around. So it's just become an issue for everybody, whether that's books or just the raw materials such as paper. Capacity has been reduced as well. A lot of folks have changed over to packaging, as everybody has seen with Amazon's numbers. A lot more brown corrugated boxes and paper packaging has needed to be made over the last 12 months, and some of that has come at the at the mercy of fine book papers. In terms of book manufacturers themselves, there has been continued consolidation. We've seen, obviously Quad has closed some of their book plants, which have been bought up by other groups such as Bertelsmann, CJK, et cetera, and other, just other consolidation that's been happening in the industry. COVID in general, I mean, it kind of goes without saying, but it really has affected how book manufacturers have had to operate, whether it's rearranging things in their plants or the way that they're scheduling workers to help mitigate social distancing and cleaning protocols and all of those things. Because a positive test in a specific shift that has can affect a lot of people would be very detrimental to a group that already has extended wait times because the demand is so high. For any of the rest of you on the call that have children, every time the phone rings and you see it's the school system, you're wondering if your kid's going to be at home for 2 more weeks because of a of a close proximity interaction with a positive test. Well, the same thing's happening in all these manufacturing plants across the country. So it definitely has had an effect on the industry. Transportation freight challenges I've already discussed. It's just going to continue for this foreseeable future. There doesn't really seem to be any great fix on the horizon from anything that we've seen. With regards to labor challenges, I mean, we had during COVID, some folks felt the need to stay home because they had to care for loved ones, or they had health compromise situations that being exposed would be quite problematic. So there's had been some hiring, which, to be honest, hiring in the book manufacturing space has been a challenge for years now. We've had an aging workforce, folks retiring, and not enough people coming up through the ranks and in the younger generations to fill all those gaps. There was a little bit of if you could call it a silver lining to all of the layoffs and folks who didn't have jobs in the spring, summertime of 2020, is that put a little bit of a bump in the supply of potential labor for book manufacturers. I know we had a few members who were able to pick up a few new staff during that time, but unfortunately, that's generally not skilled labor trained in everything. There's some folks you got to train from the ground up, but labor continues to be a challenge. I think there's a lot of folks out there who would love to run an extra shift or have more things going up their capacity, but just can't find the workers to make that happen. And lastly, the education market still continues to be a big challenge. The shift away from the physical textbook continues, and with folks doing school from home, this last year's even more challenging for the ed market, trying to figure out what schools are going to want from a textbook standpoint. There's been a lot more use of take-home materials and maybe the tear out workbook style books, which has been good. And in certain school systems and certain categories, you've seen a big uptick in there. But on the whole, when you look at the numbers across the board, the education market continues to decline, and that can is very problematic for a lot of publishers and folks who are dealing with that in the ed market. For BMI, we are the trade association for book manufacturers and the suppliers, so paper folks, the OEMs, and the like. For this year, we've got two major areas of focus. One is on continued research, industry focus just overall on the book manufacturing industry. We'll hopefully have a state of the industry report coming out fairly soon. We're going to dig a little bit deeper into the education market and see what that means to folks and how that is changing. And then lastly, we want to help our own members really look at benchmarks and some kind of financial analysis to see how they're doing and what 2020 has meant for them as things have changed in the last 12 months. Then we also are focusing on industry education. We want to kind of put together a 101 level intro course. So if any manufacturers are hiring new folks, what is that information that they, if you're coming from working at a hotel that doesn't have any staff anymore and you get into book manufacturing, what is that you need to know to really to help you excel in your job? And also for publishers that may, you may have new staff on your roles that need to learn about manufacturing and what do they need to know. So we're going to look into that kind of education, and then continue to have our industry check-in webinars. I know some folks I see here on this attendee list have been part of those in the past, but we just like to check in with our members to see what's going on, hear straight from their lips, and see how they're managing through everything right now. And then our roundtable webinars are more functional focus, say HR, finance, IT, and really gives a chance for our members, for their HR, IT, finance staff to talk to each other to see how they can best improve their businesses and excel as a company. This is my contact information. If you're interested in BMI at all, or if there's anything I can do to help, feel free to reach out. And we appreciate our continued partnership and involvement with Brian and BISG, and hope to continue that for years to come. So, Brian, thanks for letting me be part of this.
Thank you. And why don't you leave that up for a little bit, because Matt today has to juggle a few competing commitments. So he's going to be with us for the first half of our webinar today. But if there are any follow-ups, there's this question that came in already, and people are welcome to put in the Q&A questions of their own. But Nicole Tomasi was just asking if whether it's your members or companies in the manufacturing space overall are trying to do things like apprenticeships or training to build awareness of what's possible if you get involved in the manufacturing part of the book business.
Yeah, absolutely. We're part of the National Association of Manufacturers. NAM has quite a large reach in the manufacturing community and has tons of different apprenticeship programs and marketing programs, if you will, to try to drive awareness of jobs in manufacturing. We're also part of a group called the Graphic Arts Workforce Coalition. Sorry, trying to remember all of my acronyms. And this is a coalition of print folks of all shapes and sizes, not just books, but all anything kind of in the graphic print world, trying to drive awareness of those opportunities. We work with our members who try to do things in their individual communities. I think one of the hard parts is if you look at where a lot of our members have facilities, a lot of the larger facilities, it is not in high population areas. So, if you've ever been to Crawfordsville, Indiana, or Berryville, Virginia, which are two of the largest book plants in the country, there's not a lot there outside those walls. So getting folks to get in some of those areas is still quite difficult, but we're doing everything that we can and working with outside groups to partner up to try to make everyone aware of those possibilities as much as we can.
You talked a bit about the impact of freight, and I'm just wondering, the ocean freight, It's not just that it's taking a while to get to clear ports. The pricing for a lot of ocean coverage has been going up a lot. Is that a factor in kind of pushing demand out of international markets and into the US or into North America?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a perfect answer for that. I think what we've seen is just purely economics, supply and demand. There's a lot less room on boats because boats are backed up, and these are boats that they're supposed to go drop off and come right back with other stuff, and they're having to wait. So lead times from overseas are much longer, which just keeps backing up goods more and more and more. Therefore, supply is down, prices are high. And so until we see, a higher percentage of the population vaccinated and some of the COVID restrictions lifted to allow, everybody to go back to work freely, the ports, especially in California, are just seeing it the worst because, as everybody knows, that's kind of where most of the goods directly from China end up directly is LA, Oakland, Long Beach, and they're just crushed right now.
The Perry Crow is asking if you have a perspective, or BMI has a perspective on the tariffs that kind of originated during President Trump's administration, and whether you expect them to continue
We
for
we ha-
printed products.
we haven't heard anything to the positive or negative at this point. Um, I mean, based on what I'm seeing in Washington, it seems like that they're kicking that can down the road as they're trying to get the relief bill done and get folks confirmed and all these things. So we haven't heard anything new on that front quite yet. So it's really hard to guess.
Yeah, and during the Trump administration, the organizations like the AAP in particular that do lobby on behalf of the industry, you and I work for organizations that typically do not. But the AAP itself was fairly aggressive in trying to at least exempt certain categories of books, particularly religious Bibles and the like, from the tariffs and I think they were successful, at least in that limited instance.
Yeah, and we talk to AAP and try to be in contact with them about those things where we can help as an organization, as well as um, talking to National Association of Manufacturers, because they do a bunch of lobbying when it comes to this stuff. Now, obviously, they want manufacturing to really happen here, so sometimes the things may not align, but we're always trying to keep an eye on what other groups are doing and how we can help and specifically help our members and publishers and the printed book in general to reach wider distribution and less cost for everyone, because that's the goal.
You talked about some of the lead times going out, and I know when we talked with Matt Kennell, he's got his own press's perspective on this. But are you seeing in general extensions or increases in the lead times for manufacturing in the U.S. market?
Right now, yeah, we did an industry check-in with our members middle to late January, and pretty much everybody was saying that their lead times were larger than normal. Um, and so I haven't heard anything to the contrary that's slowing down right now, um, because we keep we keep, the good news is we keep seeing more demand for the printed book, and that's something I know we at BMI like to see. um, so I think folks are adding capacity, folks like Matt and Versa Press, and I know we have other members who have added at least added printing capacity with machinery. And now the key component is getting the human resources to operate that machinery to help just increase overall capacity at each manufacturing plant as they can.
I don't think that you or I have a perfect understanding of what the impact of print on demand or on demand technologies are for contributing to capacity overall. But you mentioned in your talk that you're seeing an increased uptake both on the publisher side for using on demand to address specific inventory challenges. But are you also seeing members kind of blending their facilities or or kind of starting maybe traditional offset printers also adding an on-demand piece?
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes it may not be true POD that they're adding, but it could be just digital short run.
Yeah.
And if you got all of my members in a room and asked them all to define POD, you'd probably have 15 different answers. Whether they're meaning true book of one, or is it just short run digital, 100 copies, 250 copies, etc. So I think there's a small handful that are maybe doing true book of one opportunities, and then many that are doing more of the digital short run, uh, things like that. And then there's some shops, that might be digital only that, for them, a large run could be 5,000, just because it's all digital. But then we still have members who are purely offset as well. But I think if there's a trend, it's definitely to be a blended facility. If they already had offset capabilities, to keep those, but then add the digital component to help, kind of have that blended uh, list of services.
Yeah, and I think the uncertainty certainly of the last year, but maybe just the uncertainty of the recent few years, particularly with turmoil in markets like education, whether it's K-12 or higher ed, have kind of made the point that there's a supply chain benefit to having the ability to produce or to manufacture closer to the actual sale. That it's hard to kind of predict with absolute certainty a run in an overseas market, bring it into the U.S. and then store it as inventory. So I think it's a combination of tools, both having on demand or in some sense, short run capability, but also having the ability to produce inventory more quickly and more effectively um, in the U.S. market.
Well, and it used to be you were sending everything to just Amazon and Barnes and Noble and some of the big retailers, and now the shift of everybody's buying online through different things and different places, has just kind of shown the need to be more flexible and nimble with where your inventory is, how many of them you have, to make sure that they get where they need to go when they need to get there. Because if we all weren't ADD and expecting our purchases to arrive within 2 days before last year, I think if anybody's like me, you're recycling more Amazon boxes each week than anything else. So
The um, I'll I'll refrain from commenting on how
but I
many.
got 3 kids, and now they've learned that they can just sit there and Dad, I want to order this, and yeah, so I get it.
I wanted to take a moment to ask you because to talk a little bit about BMI in terms of membership, because it's primarily manufacturers, but you also have associates and other companies that are
Mhm.
part of it. And we have kind of a mixture of both printers and production and people with production interests on the webinar today. How does BMI structure? How do you get involved, and what kinds of opportunities are out there to get involved in 2021?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I mean, our membership is divided into really two categories. We do have a third category, institutional members, which I think BISG and the Library of Congress are really our main institutional members. But our active members are the manufacturers, the printers, the distributors, the folks that are, really in depth involved in handling the printed book. And then we have our associate members, which are the suppliers. So you've got the HPs, Canons, Ricos of the world, the paper folks, anybody who's supplying the goods to build the books, would be our associate membership. So um, we have committees that help, kind of guide us in these projects that we'll be working on, whether those are um, coming up with our conferences, our webinar schedules, or any of these research and education projects. Those are really all volunteer led. We do have 2 conferences a year. This May will be our spring management conference. We just opened up registration today, actually. And that's our conferences are probably our largest thing that people get involved in and then like to attend different virtually than in person. Hopefully we'll be in person in November, fingers crossed, but folks can reach out to me, and we do not have a publisher membership. Publishers are not members of BMI. We think having them as members of BISG is a great place for them to be. But if we have publishers who are obviously looking for new partners, new print partners, we have a place on our website called BMI Source where you can go and fill in a kind of an RFQ that will be sent to our manufacturer members so that they can quote out jobs that
Hey, Matt, we lost you for a minute. We're not hearing your audio. It hasn't come back. Maybe they know that you're out of time.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can.
All right. Well, I had to move to my computer audio because evidently my headset crapped out.
These are the thing. What I was just gonna say.
Anyway,
I was gonna. You have to excuse
one of the
yourself.
ways you can look for BMI members if you need new printers or if you're looking for suppliers or anything like that is through the BMIbook.com website. If you look at directory, all that information is there for you, as well as the BMI Source quote request tool. You can see things about our committees, our events, resources that we have available all there on the website. And of course, contact me through phone or email, and I'm happy to chat with anybody who needs any assistance.
And before we switch gears to Matt Kennell, I just wanted to say that you and I had partnered, although I think BMI did the bulk of the work really, on the book manufacturing mastered event a little bit more than a year ago, just before the pandemic. And we have a real strong interest in doing that. That was an enormously successful event in New York, and the first time BMI had done it. But we think it's got a real value for a publishing audience in particular to teach people who may not have direct experience in book manufacturing, the basics for what's.
And I appreciate that. I appreciate you saying that. And I appreciate your involvement as well as all of our other association partners who made that happen. We've kind of sat back as a board and said, yeah, that was great. It was successful. We want to do it again, but we're kind of just on a wait and see approach as to how to do it again. Because I don't know if a virtual environment would be the best way to have that event again. Because really, you know, it allowed folks to touch and feel and see samples of books and really see, have those in-depth conversations. So we're still not 100% sure we want to try that in a virtual way. So we may just press pause and try it again in 22, but we're kind of just in a wait and see mode with that. But we definitely agree that it was a successful event and we want to do it again in some way, shape, or form.
Thanks. Thank you for being here today and for juggling your schedule on our behalf. It's been a really interesting overview, and I look forward to continuing to work with you in 2021 and beyond.
Likewise, my pleasure. Sorry that I have to jump off. I told Matt before I really wanted to hear what he has to say, so I can't wait to catch the recording. But if anybody needs me, phone or email, best way to reach me. Thank you much.
Thank you. Take care.
Yep.
Thanks for joining, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
And I'm happy to introduce Matt Kennell today, Executive Sales Director at Versa Press. Matt is the fourth generation of his family to be working in this business. They're based in or outside of Peoria, Illinois. As I mentioned in my earlier remarks, Matt's been a tremendous benefit for us, active in our supply chain committee and in one of our working groups right now. And he has a perspective on the industry that is it's both personal and that his family is directly involved in this business, but it's also grounded in several generations of work in the production and manufacturing business. So you've got a kind of an overview of where you are right now, and then you and I are going to talk a little bit about what you're seeing in the marketplace. So, Matt, take it away. Wondering if we lost Matt there for a minute. It appears we have. Let's give them a minute, see if we can come back. And while we're doing that, if there are any questions that people have, either for BISG or BMI, I can always, some of them Matt and I have already compared answers on, and if not, we will, I can compile the questions and bring them back to Matt for his review when he has an opportunity. Kevin Spall is asking if we can talk a little bit about our committee structure. We have 5 actually standing committees. They are they deal with metadata, rights, subject codes, the BISAC subject codes, which is a standard that we maintain, the supply chain itself, and workflow. And the probably the most directly involved with manufacturing is the supply chain committee, which looks at a variety of different issues. One of the things that we're spending time on this year in supply chain are 2 topics. One is the committee that Matt Kennell is working on the working group is on looking at piracy, probably limited to the education sector this year. And a second are questions of returns in the trade marketplace. And it's those committees have kind of been longstanding. The newest among them is workflow, which goes back about 2.5, 3 years. Each of them is chaired by a BISG member, and they meet monthly, generally in the 2nd and 3rd weeks of the month for typically an hour. Metadata meets for about an hour and a half, and subject codes schedules for as much as 3 hours. If you want more information on the committees, a good way to get at it is to go to the BISG website. One of the main menu tabs is actually on our committees, and there's background information there as well. If you just write to info@bisg.org, we can either send you information or get you set up for any one of the committees. Participation on a regular basis in the committees is limited to staff of companies that are members of BISG. We have about 180 members and 180 companies that are members, and something north of 2,400 individuals, of whom about 400 are active in our committee structure. There's a question from Jennifer, who's asking, when we print in Europe and China, we have many more paper options for both coded and uncoded sheets, and any thoughts on why this is the case? I think I'm getting Matt, welcome back.
Hey, Brian.
Good to have you. I have a question for you once you get started, but we had just put up the slides with to give a little bit of an overview of Versa before you and I got involved in a Q&A. Are you okay starting on that?
Yep, I should be good.
Great, thanks. So I'll just go to the first slide here.
So yeah, VersaPress has been around for a little over 80 years. We are I'm 4th generation management. We have roughly 250 employees. We serve largely, probably over 60-70% in the trade market, but we also serve education, religious, university press publishers. We've really cast our net wide in order to serve a broad audience. We strive to be industry leading in terms of technology, to keep our plant up to date, and we've continued to grow over the years, especially over the last decade. I'm gonna go to the next slide, Brian. So yeah, just a little bit of an idea of where we're located. We're really positioned well in terms of where distributors are and a lot of our customers use. The Chicago distributing centers are all 1-day ship points, and as well as Indianapolis in that area. So we've I guess grown as a company organically. You can kind of see the company as it moved out to its current location in 1969 versus 2020, and looking at plans for another addition to that building here in the next year or two. So yeah, kind of with the mindset of a diverse offering as digital printing came on, as well as ebooks. And we saw a little bit of a pullback in the marketplace. We decided to bring ourselves into 4-color text printing. And we had done 4-color covers for a long time, had the expertise in it. And as we moved that direction, we quickly found that publishers had a need for that. And that's roughly 40% of our capacity today. Just a little bit of an overview of some of the binding types. We do both soft cover and hard cover. Some specialty bindings like Autobind lay flat, flexi case. A little bit in response to the fact that we're seeing publishers, doing new releases overseas for a 4-color book, and then oftentimes bringing that back as a reprint here domestically. So in the last 2 years, we've invested in a Muller Martini perfect binding line, which we add as an additional binder. We've since then added 2 more shifts to that line. By doing so, it's kind of had a overall effect on many of our other binders, as it allows us to kind of silo sizes. Kind of a 6x9 family on a binder, an 8.5 by 11 family on a binder, and so on. We've also partnered with manufacturers of equipment, in this case, folding equipment, to develop a shingling technology, which allows us to double the output without actually increasing the belt speed into the machinery. So that's been a nice thing to see. So we're not necessarily relying on people per se to be added to get that capacity. We're utilizing technological advancement to do so. We've also had shifts to the hardcover department. This was even before the COVID pandemic happened, and have since then done more so. Next slide, Brian. Yeah, so with COVID, a lot of what Matt Baehr was saying resonates at First Press. We kind of saw Q2 drop off. We've been fortunate to not have any major outbreaks in terms of, a whole binding line going down, because I should knock on wood as I'm saying this. But it certainly had an impact on just operationally, putting up barriers in places where proximity is hard to overcome. We've seen a quick recovery in, obviously, in the fall of last year. We're experiencing extended lead times as well at VersaPress. We're working to mitigate that. We purchased a 1-color press last year. And this year we've just announced the ordering of a 8-color offset press, which will, I think, hit the floor in July. Is there another slide there, Brian?
Yep.
So a big thing I like to talk about when I talk to Brian about capacity is that it's really it's not just buying a press. It's kind of balancing a complex network of different departments. So like purchasing a plate feeder last January, things in the folding department need to be balanced with the press room, things in the bindery department need to be balanced. And so a lot of what we're doing right now is preparing for the next sheet fed offset press that'll be coming in July or August, and laying some of that groundwork so that when that press is installed, we can kind of hit the ground running. That press is going to be outfitted with LED UV technology. It's a more environmentally friendly ink than what you would traditionally consider as a UV ink. It also allows us, when it comes to 4-color, to be able to cure that, have a little bit better control over it, not necessarily seeing the same amount of time where you're sitting, letting that ink dry naturally. You're able to cure it just with an LED light and then move it on to the next department right away. This will also kind of have some downstream capacity implications for both 2-color and 1-color capacity. Yeah, I think I kind of covered everything on this slide, but I guess kind of our outlook on the industry is that we're excited, that publishers have been seeing a quick rebound and readership's up. I think it was 8.2% physical units of an increase in 2020 over 2019, which obviously spoke a lot to what happened in Q3 and Q4 of last year. And, the environment now is kind of a difficult one, I think, that both publishers and printers find themselves in terms of adapting to the new lead time landscape and working together to try to continue to put books on the shelves in stores and doing so in a successful manner.
It's pretty clear that Versus continue to invest, and because buying a press is not a small bet, and particularly for a smaller or family controlled business, it's a big bet overall. And I'm just wondering what you're thinking. How do you think about what the market looks like, not just next year or later this year, but over time? And what's led you to kind of continue to be bullish in terms of expanding from where you were at the end of the 60s to where you are today?
So I think that we've, always looked at things from a fairly conservative lens in terms of, the decisions we are making on equipment. So a lot of the groundwork has already been laid for, we've added, I guess this will be the 4th 8-color offset press. So we've seen that happen. We know what capacity that's going to free up downstream. We know what we're going to need to support there. But we've seen a steady increase in kind of a return from overseas printing to once again utilizing US or North American based 4-color printing. So, from that standpoint, I think there's an immediate effect from the shipping issues that publishers are dealing with. This is probably the first year that we've really seen a larger number of global publishers in terms of UK publishers and as other countries as well that are kind of looking, would have been traditionally using overseas printing, as maybe 90% of their printing to now saying, we need to do something different. We need to be printing in that end market. So I think that's been a big kind of side story to just the overall increase in readership. I think offset, printing and POD printing both have a place in the market. But the fact that, when you look at a POD or a digital printing equipment, which we have some digital printing equipment, the number of units that you're going to get off of those binding lines is not going to significantly impact the type of numbers that we're seeing in terms of growth in units and demand. Even where we're at right now, thinking about, okay, if you're seeing 1 or 2 or 3 weeks longer lead times, it's going to be it's going to take any printer a fair amount of time to draw that back. It's basically either adding capacity or you're seeing slower sales or sales going to a different print house, which allows you to then kind of do some catch up, which draws down your backlog. So I think it's a from a BMI perspective, or a book manufacturing perspective, I think, we feel good about the publishing market, in terms of a place to be doing business in. It is capital intensive, kind of as you alluded to kind of make those bets. But it's certainly not on a whim, and it's certainly something that I think is even more needed now than in the past.
When you and I were talking about this ahead of today's webinar, you made the point that when you look at consolidations and actually in some companies going out of the market entirely, relative to, is it fair to say that 2020 was, in terms of printing, the single biggest market in a decade since 2010?
Yeah, I had heard something about that the total number of physical units has risen to finally surpass the level that it kind of peaked at in 2009, 2010.
Yeah.
And that the landscape of printers that you look at, if you're looking at the 2010 list versus the list today, is completely different. We've seen, Edwards Brothers Malloy basically go out of business due to some pension issues. We've seen Thompson Shore go out of business or somewhat get bought out of bankruptcy, but for all intents and purposes, that capacity was basically taken out, 90% of it. And even the other day, we heard something about another printer that was independently owned, probably about half the size of us, but still significant capacity. That was, I think it was an Italian company that purchased the stake, and saw a little press release on that. But the Penguin Random House or the Berryville Graphics purchase of those two quad plants, I think was maybe a smart strategic move on their part. But I guess from my perspective, where I sit, I don't know whether that's, they're going to be using that strictly to kind of make sure that Penguin Random House books are, being produced versus how much Berryville is doing overflow work for other publishers. So it's basically asking a book manufacturing supply chain in North America to do the same, or more units than it did in 2010. And I think that's kind of telling as to, where we're at in terms of lead times.
And that kind of pushes out lead times, but it also, it probably also makes there's some constraints in the U.S. marketplace that hopefully will get worked out over time as we rebuild the book manufacturing sector in North America. I wanted to ask you, if I could, there was a question that came in that I don't have an immediate answer for, but it came in while you were rebooting, from Jennifer, asking that her house prints in Europe and China, and feels that in those instances they have many more options for paper, both coated and uncoated, than is the case in North America. Do you have a perspective on that, or why it might be the case?
I do not. I think I can speak to the U.S. paper market. We've seen things like 50-pound vellum, of white vellum offset versus a smooth. We've seen mills, take those and basically stop producing them, other than on like a accumulation basis, which means that enough printers have to put in truckloads for that sheet before they'll actually make a run of it. So it basically makes it almost untenable in terms of, and other than special ordering it, a truckload at a time for a specific book, it kind of takes that sheet out of the market when a paper mill does that, or the whole, some more than one mill does that. But, for example, we stock 60, 70, 80, 100-pound coated mats, 70 and 80-pound gloss, a variety of offset weights. It's not, usually when I see overseas specs coming in, there's a conversion, from GSM to pounds, and we have an equivalent sheet to it. There may be some unique papers that are used overseas for certain products that don't have an easy equivalent, certainly in a stocking program. But those might be more specialized markets or specialized titles.
Thanks. And for Jennifer, we have in a couple of weeks a webinar similar to this one that we're looking at the paper market overall. If you can give me a couple of weeks, I'll see what we can find out, and either through the speaker or just on that webinar, bring it back to you. We also have contact information for everybody who's registered. So if I learn something before then that can help answer that, I'll certainly bring it back. I have a question from somebody who's looking for information specifically about Versa, just saying, are you looking to add more capacity in your short run digital offering in the next year or two?
So yeah, I mean, we're looking at that as well. It's kind of a matter of making sure we have the right fit. But I think right now in this environment, offsets kind of taken priority. Just in terms of trying to correct the supply demand balance, we're focusing more of our efforts there.
And your lead times in general had been, correct me if I'm wrong, but it had been about 4 weeks, and now you're out to about 6 weeks. Is that a good?
Yeah, I would say that 3 to 4 weeks was kind of a traditional paperback lead time, and we've seen things now going outside of even 6 weeks at times. It's oscillated a little bit. At some points we've actually felt like we were getting on the other side of it, potentially due to the fact that we had installed a one color offset press just last August. The timing kind of just had kind of worked out. So we were able to kind of immediately add capacity, and had the bindery shifts already in place to kind of absorb it in that case. But kind of like Matt Baehr was saying, when they did their January check-in, people were generally saying that their lead times were continuing to be extended. I think as a result of increasing order quantities and a few other factors, it seems like it's staying at that elevated level.
And the feedback that you've received as an individual printer is that the lead times you currently have, maybe in the range of 6 weeks, are actually relatively short, or a little bit shorter than where the average in the industry is?
For a good chunk of time, it was that sort of a thing, and I think naturally, I think we're of a large enough size that and a diverse enough customer base that publishers then kind of backfill that capacity. Each product type and case binding certainly been even longer lead times than 6 weeks, and just as a function of that equipment being at a much slower speed, the equipment, the fastest equipment basically runs at 3,500 an hour in terms of casing in lines, versus perfect binding lines can run up to 18,000. So I think we're right in line with a lot of people. Maybe I wouldn't say that we're necessarily, I don't have as much of a feel as to whether we're coming in lower than other printers, but in certain cases, there's some people that are even further out than that, maybe more from a contractual basis and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask, because you said at the outset when you were describing the philosophy the company has, you serve a variety of different types of markets and a variety of different types of formats, and that has to make the planning challenge more difficult. If you were doing, for argument's sake, only 6x9 work, or you were only doing paperback or only case bound, you would have a different production challenge than the one you have. But the the facility and I guess your family are committed to continuing to serve a variety of different markets?
Yeah, so we've kind of always been of the mindset that we wanted to serve the book publishing industry in general. So 100% of our revenues are derived from book publishers. We don't have another product segment like magazines or catalogs, and I think we've seen that over the years. It's been enjoyable to work with publishers on a basis of not necessarily a contractual basis, but more of a we earn your business on an ongoing basis through customer service, good quality, um, uh, good pricing, all the things that publishers are looking for. And so a lot of our customers will be, our largest customers would be less than 5% of our overall revenues. So we're not everything to every publisher. We tend to serve a portion of our customers' product needs. And I think here in the last decade, getting into 4-color offset printing in a big way, getting into hardcover binding in-house in the last decade, specialty finishings has allowed us to kind of spread that net even further. But the nature of sheet fed offset printing, I think, kind of allows you to batch things well, be efficient still. So it's not as much of a planning nightmare as it sounds. But it's book manufacturing is certainly a challenge, but one that's enjoyable.
I had one last question for you, unless something else comes in from the folks who are gathered today. And that's around the idea that because you do work with over a long period of time with a lot of your clients, that you've kind of come up with a way, not necessarily to shorten lead times, but to kind of plan for capacity by effectively reserving, not based on a purchase order, but on a projection of I'm going to need time for this many books at this time down the road. And you kind of plan, you block out specific pieces for that for clients with whom you have an ongoing relationship. It's an interesting way to manage it, and maybe take a minute just to explain how that works at Versa.
Yeah, so it's not on a large percentage of jobs, but certainly with publishers that we have a relationship with, where things are, we can anticipate how things are going to go. If they have a date that they know files are going to be in at, on March 9th, and now we're well, I guess we should say April 9th, we can go out beyond where our press capacity is currently at, and we can block out 10,000 units worth of press time and the one color press room, for example. And we don't have to have that necessarily slotted to the hour or anything like that. It's more to the day, so across 3 shifts type of thing. So we can basically say, okay, it's going to come in April 9th. The page count, it doesn't have to be 224, but usually it'll give us some sort of an idea of what it's going to be, and it might range plus or minus 32 pages. The quantity might even be a range of 8 to 12,000, that sort of thing. So it gives the publisher a little bit of flexibility, but it requires advanced planning, and it also requires, I think, transparency between publisher and book manufacturer to kind of make those things go smoothly. But the idea behind it is that, rather than just the next order coming in today and then that order being, put out at our next available, press window, you're kind of saying, okay, I got this really important new title, coming up, and we want to hit, a certain pub date. By doing that, you can kind of you can kind of get in line ahead of time in a sense. And so we'll do that on a limited basis with publishers, and it's been successful in terms of not making every project have to take a longer lead time than what we're normally used to dealing with.
Yeah, and it's an important piece of advice for anyone trying to squeeze as much flexibility out of the process, is to create a more transparent and open relationship with your manufacturing partner to see what capabilities they can bring to the table. This is just one last question, and I think I already know the answer, which is Stella's just asking about production data that coming in using Onyx, the metadata standard for the book business. I don't think that's something that's been implemented at Versa or really any other manufacturer at this point. Is that the case?
Yeah, I don't, it has not been done at VersaPress, and I'm not aware of it being done.
We are, to Stella's question, we are looking at the implementation of Block 8, which is the provision of production data, not from an order standpoint, but from the ability to describe the manufacturing specifications for on-demand and audiobooks. But that's kind of in beta right now. And if you're really interested in that work, touch base with us and maybe we can bring you into one of the metadata discussions that we're having around it. Matt, thank you very much today. I know that you're borrowing time from other things and on our behalf, as was Matt Baehr. Thanks for coming here. Thanks for bearing with us through technical difficulties. And we really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you in a committee in a couple of weeks.
Yep, sounds good. It was good to be here, and good to check in.
Thanks, and take care. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.